in between time. But when you
Okay.
Alright, you guys. I'm not ready to get started. I'd love for you guys to. Is this like a taking notes thing or like?
You might want to take notes. I'm recording it right now, and I'll put it up on my YouTube channel. So if you guys need to go back and reference what I said, it's gonna be up there.
Okay.
Yeah. But you might want to take notes. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay. So the question I ask at the beginning is, what is programming and why should I care? Because I notice I tend to tune out a lot of PowerPoints because it's like I'm never gonna use this, you know. But programming is pretty important because, you know, there's only really two things that make a game worth playing, and that's art style and mechanics. And pretty much the only way to get mechanics is through programming. If you want anything even kind of unique, you gotta basically program it in. And it's not very hard. But if you already have art style, you're half the way there. And all you have to do then is, you know, add some mechanics. And it's really not as hard as people make it out to be. But regardless, you should make it a priority to at least know some, so that even if you're not programming in the mechanics, you know how to like debug code or, you know, just look at something and know kind of what it does. So a lot of people think programming looks like this, and it does at some points, but when you guys are starting out, it's going to look much, much simpler. So it's really like not scary or something you should be worried about, because I notice a lot of time in movies they'll give you that Hollywood hacker thing, like all of these quotes that make no sense when you actually distill them down. Like you end up translating them, and like something like that just translates to "internet's down again," or, you know, "thick as the weather." Bad pun. You know, just stuff like that. So it's not scary. It's a way to add mechanics to your game, and it's kind of similar to creative writing in English. Actually, what you're basically doing is you're using syntax, which is kind of like grammar, to just make a sentence so that the computer knows what you're trying to do. And it's very, very similar to the hot glue and cardboard type prototyping that we really like to do. It's kind of just, you know, write once, run it, stare at it, wonder why it's not working, fix one character, and then print it again. Okay, so programming uses a lot of variables, just like you learned in math, but it uses a bunch of different types of variables. So you can use all of these types that are right here. So like integer, and that's just basically any whole number. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5, a billion, whatever. Float. Now, a float is just like an integer, but it can have a decimal point. So it can be like 1.7 or 8 or 1.99999, whatever. String. String is an actual like piece of text. So it could be like a chat message or an error message or what have you, you know, whatever you want to put in. And then there's a Boolean. Now, a lot of you probably have never heard that one before. That's basically just a true-false condition. So, like, for example, you know, camera.canMove, you know, and you could set that whether or not the camera could move, and you could program in so that the camera can't move when that's true. And then there's a vector, and this one is specific to Unity. Basically, it's just a point in space. So, like, you know, the origin would be 0, 0, 0, or, you know, a little bit farther from the origin would be 1, 2, 3, or something like that. All right, and then you have the publicity of the variable. You can have either public or private for that. Basically, what that means is if you have a public variable, you can have any one of these variables and have it public and have it. That basically just means that another script can set it. So you can have one script here and another script here, and this script can interact with the variable in this script, but only if it's public. If it's private, it doesn't. It's not shown to any other scripts. You're not allowed to like modify it anywhere else. Basically, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Whenever you're doing code, you like set it up to where it, what's it called? To where it accesses or applies to all floats or all images?
No, but you wouldn't really want to do that anyway because you use coding for a lot, like the whole mechanics. So, you know, setting all floats you have in your entire program wouldn't really be good. You wouldn't want to do that, really. Okay, so. Oh, I kind of already ran through these. So that's what an integer means. It means any whole number that can be negative. A float is any decimal number, and that can be negative too. I didn't put that in. A string is basically, you know, just text, and it can be any length within reason. Like, don't set it so far the computer can't handle it. And you can use symbols too, like, question marks, commas, whatever you want. Basically whatever. Boolean, true, false condition, only be true and false. Okay, so now we have the syntax, and this is basically the grammar, or how you actually write out the code. So that would be like an example of a variable statement. So we're saying public, so that means that anything can access it. Int, so that's short for integer. And then test variable, that's the name right there. And you'll notice I capitalized the next word because you can't have spaces in the names of your variables. So I just capitalize it to kind of indicate that that's a separate word. And then equals 100, so that is equal to 100. So if we were to call test variable, that basically just means 100. The computer would just replace it with that, basically. And then there's a semicolon at the end, another important part of coding. Pretty much any line, there are some exceptions, but pretty much every line you're going to end with a semicolon. And believe me, that gets everyone. Like, everyone will forget to put a semicolon, and it'll error out, and you'll be looking like forever to figure out what's wrong with it, and you'll be like, oh, I forgot a semicolon. Okay, so here's an example of another one. So private, so that means that only things inside the script can access this variable. Bool, so that's short for Boolean. Was mixtape fire equals true. So that basically means that, this is equal to true. When you put this anywhere in code, your interpreter is going to replace this with true. And again, I have the semicolon at the end there. And then this is what a string would look like. So if you notice right here, like if I were to set Boolean, I couldn't put a 100 here or whatever. That would error out. Right here, I don't just put the text. I have to put double quotes around the text. That indicates that it is a string. Basically, that's how you create one on the fly if you weren't going to set it ahead of time. That's how you basically tell the interpreter, everything in here I don't want you to interpret. Okay? And then this is another thing you can do. This is what's called an array. So it's the same as up here, public, int, but then I have these little brackets right here. That basically means that it's not going to be a single number. It's going to be like a table of numbers or a list of numbers, basically. So I could set public int, and then I can put in these brackets 0, and that could mean get the first number in this array. Okay? And I didn't put an equal sign. You don't have to put an equal sign after variables. You can just say they exist and not say what they're equal to. If you try to call them before you set what they're equal to, though, your interpreter will error out. But you can declare them before you set them, basically.
In a string, can you have spaces?
Yes, you can have whatever you want in the string. It just has to be in those quotes. So right here, that is a valid string because it does have spaces, but it is in between the quotes. You'll also notice that I've highlighted some specific words in this. If you look inside the interpreter, it will do this too. You don't have to memorize the colors, though. I haven't even memorized the colors. It just kind of helps you pick stuff out a little bit easier, Okay, so now we go into loops. Loops is basically the other fundamental thing about programming. Each one is very simple, but you'll use it a lot. Like in pretty much every piece of code, you're probably going to have at least one loop. So the first one is if-else. Some of them come in pairs, some of them don't. If-else basically just means, if this is true, do this. And then you can put an else on the end. If whatever you put in the if statement isn't true, do this. So that's pretty fundamental. You can have for, which is basically it'll do whatever's in the loop over and over and over again until you specify it to stop. Usually it's like a number, but you can change that. A for each, you can specify an array for each. So basically do this loop for each thing in this array, kind of. And then a while loop. So you give all of these arguments, basically, and depending on what the arguments are, it'll do different things. So if-else, if the argument equals true, then it'll do what's in the if statement. If it doesn't, it'll do what's in the else statement. With while, basically, if whatever arguments you give it are true, it'll continue to do what's inside that loop until they equal false. So if your code isn't ending, that's probably why. You probably have a while statement that never equals false. Okay, and then you have a try-catch. Now this is basically what you do if you have a bit of code that you're not sure is going to work. So for example, if you were opening up the camera on your phone, it might not work because there might be another app using the microphone, or there might be another app using the camera. And if you call that and something else is using the camera, it'll error out on you. But if you put it in a try-catch loop, you can catch that error before the interpreter stops your program and handle it yourself. So, you can stop it from quitting itself. Okay, so this is like the specifics of the if-else statement. So like after this, you'll have a set of arguments, and if it equals true, like if you have, if was mixtape fire equals true, then, do that. And if it is equal to true, it'll do that, basically. I guess I'll skip these because I already kind of explained them. Okay, so here's some of the syntax. So right here, this looks just like the variable syntax because it is. I'm setting this bool to true. And then I'm setting a string to true. So this is like an error message. So you guys, since you're programming now, you're going to be creating the error messages and making them, like send to the user during certain parts. So right here, that is the actual if statement. So you'll notice I don't have a semicolon on this line. That's because it's a loop. You don't need semicolons on the end of loops because this isn't an end of line. This is encasing something. So if I show all the code. So right here, this is the argument that we're sending it. It's a Boolean. This is the only variable that you can do like this. Since this is a Boolean, this will always either equal true or false. But if you were to put an int here, you'd have to compare the int to something. And then right there, I have the little curly bracket, and I have another curly bracket here. So everything that's in between here and here is inside this if statement. So this will only run if this if statement is true, basically. And then you can see I've attached an else statement on the end of this. So this kind of relates to this. So if this isn't true, it'll run this. So if it's not fire, it'll error out. And I show that a little bit more here. Oh, I guess I don't. This is a while statement, basically. So right now, the error exists equals true. So that ends up equaling true. So it will do this forever. Basically, it'll say, did I do that over and over and over again, like infinitely fast, basically, forever, until something sets that to false, or you stop it. Okay, so another important thing here is namespace or scope. Now, a lot of people find this a little bit hard, but it's not too hard to get over, I think. Basically, what this is your interpreter erroring out on your program because you set a variable, or you're trying to get a variable that doesn't exist. So a lot of times this will happen because you'll, for example, define a variable and then ask for its value before you set it. So, it doesn't know what that is, obviously, because you haven't set it yet. Or you might be asking for a variable that's inside a different script, or, a variable that's private inside a different script, or, something like that. Basically, it doesn't know what you're trying to ask for because you haven't told it yet, basically, is what that is. Yeah. It also might happen if you define what a variable is but don't set it yet, and then you set it inside an if statement, and then you ask for it later. If that if statement isn't true, it's not going to set it. So when you ask for it later, that if statement didn't run. It still doesn't know what it's equal to, so you can't ask for it. All right, so you guys okay? Do you have any questions? I know that was really fast and really. No?
Probably
No.
practice.
Okay.
Can we put this on the website or something so we can get back to it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm recording this and I'll put it up on my YouTube channel.
And we'll put the PowerPoint on the
Yeah.
school G's.
So
I mean, my question is, and this is just showing my lack of knowledge, but all of these things are to do. I mean, I don't even know what my question is.
So basically, what it's going to end up being is a lot like a creative writing thing that you have in English. You'll basically, you'll set a variable, and then you'll do stuff to that variable, and then it'll spit out an answer. So for example, on Unity, you can take specific objects, and, if the camera's allowed to move, then I'll move the camera. And, I'll have another script that'll set whether that camera is allowed to move based on certain conditions. So, if I was making an Angry Birds game, for example, if you just fired a shot, then you should make sure the camera can move to follow that shot. But, if you're still at the little thing where you are shooting, you don't want the camera to just move all over the place or, follow the last ball. So you're going to set it so that it can't move. It'll go back there. So you have another script to figure that out, and then you have a script on the camera to figure out whether it should move or what it should follow. And you'll have a script on, the touch screen to make sure you're getting all the movements and stuff like that. And they just all kind of talk together.
So say it was scripting a certain move for a fight or something like that. After I got done scripting the health bar or something like that, would I use a true or false else statement to see whether or not it hit, and then apply a damage.
Now, what we call that is a listener, basically. The Unity engine will give you a bunch of events that will like tell you basically or run on certain conditions. So that would be an on collision enter, I believe. You just write a function for that, and on collision enter. So when something hits that, it would take how hard it hit it, and then subtract that from the health. And the health could be stored on a script that's stored on the actual player itself, and that could be calculated and stored inside a variable, and then other scripts can come in and access that. Yeah. All right. If we have time, I can show a demo really quick.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Okay, so what I have set up in the Unity thing that's coming up, basically I made a little world with 2 players, okay? So you can see the 2 players right there. That's you, and that's the boss. This is kind of like a boss battle scene. So have you ever played those games where there's a boss battle and the boss does exactly what you do? He moves exactly where you do, and he like jumps and moves around. You guys have heard of that, right? Okay, well, I'm going to recreate that because that's pretty simple here. And I actually finished the script already, but I'll script it again for you guys live. So this is basically what it does. So if you look, he's moving exactly opposite to me. And, he's jumping when I jump and, everything like that. So how I did that is, hold on. There we go. Hold on, I just got to open it because the Unity thing doesn't work for some reason. Google Drive, okay.
It's simple to buy more complex
Where did I put it? There we go. Okay, so this is the finished script basically, and wow, that's kind of hard to see actually. Can I make it bigger? Oh, it's not going to work if I can't make it bigger. See one? No. Come on.
Usually you can do Control+.
No. Hold on, let me get my mouse.
Make it full window thing. 2 arrows that face outwards in the top right.
Will that work? No, it just makes it smaller. Hold on.
I think it makes it the same size.
There's a shortcut where you click like command and mouse.
You
Alright,
can
I'll-
just use the touch button. Go off the way.
Alright, I'll just explain what everything says, basically. Okay, so that line up there, it says public class prefab script. That's basically, if Unity just reads this as a text file, I'm declaring what it is. I'm saying this is a class, and that's basically just another word for a script. And the name is prefab script. That's really important. If you like rename the file, you have to rename it here. Otherwise, Unity won't know what's going on, really.
Why are you calling it that?
I'm calling it prefab script. Prefab just basically means it's something that's like pre-created. So, for example, if you have a bunch of enemies, you'd make a prefab script for their health, so that you could just copy and paste those enemies anywhere you need them, and it would just work. It's just a naming thing. It doesn't have to be that. And right now I'm hitting a variable, and I'm calling it public bool snap other to me. And that basically means I can set that to false, and then the enemy won't follow me. The enemy will stay stationary, or at least he won't move relative to me. Other scripts can still move him. And then we have right here, this is what's called a function, and it says void start. So the void in front of it just basically means that it's not going to return anything. When it's done running, it's done running. It's not sending any messages back to whatever started it running. And then start, which is just the name of the function. Unity actually looks for a couple of functions right off the bat. It looks for start and update. As soon as those are called, or as soon as the engine starts, it'll try to run those if these are attached to something. So start only runs once. This basically runs the first time the script is opened, and then never again unless you call it specifically. Update runs once every frame, so a bunch of times a second, like 60 times a second, or a lot. Okay, and this is where I'm doing all my calculations because I don't want it to just snap to my position once and then never do it again. I want it to always snap to my position if this is true. So that's where the if statement comes in. If it is true, I want to set the position. Here's where I'm setting the position. All right, so down here, I actually have the syntax, and there's a little bit of Unity-specific syntax, but it's not too bad. So right here, this bit to this bit says game object, so I'm referencing something physical inside the Unity engine, dot find. So anything I put in here, it's looking for an object that has that name, and I put shadow player there. So if you go back right here, we have an object called shadow player, and it's the little capsule right there. So that's what we're actually targeting. Okay? Dot transform dot position. Now dot transform basically means that we're editing like its physical position in the world. And dot position means we're editing the position, not the rotation or the scale or anything. Okay, so now equals. That's important basically. We're setting its position to something else. So what I'm doing here is new vector 3. So you notice I told you vector was an actual variable type. But I don't want to have to initialize it up here because that's too much work, and us coders are lazy. So I'm making a new vector 3 just right off the bat. I don't need to name it or anything like that because I'm already setting where it's being used, basically. Okay, and then I have these right here, the parentheses. Basically, that's how you're telling it what the arguments of it are. So I'm making a new vector 3. I got to tell it where it is in space. So now I'm doing this .gameObject.transform.position. So this basically means I'm referencing whatever this script is attached to. So actually, more specifically, this means I'm referencing this script in particular. This .gameObject means I'm referencing whatever this script is attached to, basically. So right now, I have the script attached to the player. So this guy, the guy that you're actually controlling. So what I'm doing is I'm finding his transform.position.x, and this is important. Now what I could do here is set this.gameObject.transform.position, and these two would be equal, but the problem with that is, number one, if I don't put a minus in front of it, he's just going to be on top of me 24/7. He's going to be like the exact same position that I am, and that's not right. If I put a minus on top of it, he will be, like walking around, because I have centered this about the origin, but like when he jumps, for example, he'll go through the world instead of jumping up, because, I'm making his Y position negative too, so if I jump, he's going to go the opposite direction. So what I need to do is make a new vector 3 to kind of compensate for that. So I'm setting his X to be negative, because of course we want him to, move opposite from us in the horizontal plane. I'm also setting his Z to be negative, because, again, I want him to move opposite from me. But I am setting the Y position to be the same as mine, so that when I jump, for example, he'll jump with me instead of going through the land. And that's a lot of what programming is. It's not like, learning the syntax or, doing all these complex math equations. It's kind of just figuring out a puzzle. Like, okay, I want to do this. Let me write out that step of how simply to do it. Like, if you were to do those activities where you'd have to, like, write out a checklist for someone to do something really hard that they've never done before, Like, we did that in Mr. Stevenson's class while he was still here, kind of.
What type is this? What language? Yeah, what language?
This is C#, because, when he was in here, he told us C# superior. Yeah, and that's really just because it's used everywhere else. JavaScript is more of a web technology, so it's not really integrated in game development. If you know C#, you know basically how to do most things in most engines right off the bat, kind of. If you guys need any help with this, by the way, Unity has some awesome documentation, and everyone uses documentation. Like, all programmers of really any skill level will always use documentation because it's really important. But, so basically what we can do is go right here, and you can search for anything you need. So like, for example, what's a game object? I can search for game object, and it will come up with no results because it's slow.
You didn't put a space.
There it is. You don't need a space. Because again, this is, if you look inside the actual thing, I don't have a space here, because you can't have spaces in this. Yeah. If you have a space, it assumes you mean something totally different. So like public int. If you put no space in between that, it won't know what it is, because public int doesn't exist. If you put a space in between it, public is separate from int. So if you want to know what game object is, you can just click on it, and it'll explain what a game object is. It'll show, screenshots of it. It'll explain kind of how to use it. If it's a scripting specific thing, it will actually show you some example code on it. So for example, transform.position. So yeah, like right here, for example, it's not actually showing you a example script for this one, but it is giving you like a table of what all this stuff means. So like transform.position, changing the XYZ coordinates. .rotation changes the physical rotation of the scale, for example. So I would highly recommend using this because this is the most awesome resource you can find currently. It's just, it's made by Unity. It has examples for all 3 languages if you want to use them. It'll be like up here if you want to change languages, by the way, up there. So you can like set it to be C#, JavaScript, Boo. Don't use Boo. Don't use Boo. That's another name of a language. It's what's called reciprocated, which means it's still in Unity, but it's getting removed in the next version, so don't use it. Yeah. So with this very simple script right here in Unity, now we've created something that looks a lot more complex than it really is, and that's a lot of what programming is making something look really complex. So the reason this works, by the way, is because I have centered this plane around the origin. Right there is 0.00, so, if we move around it, over here is going to be like, 3, 3, and over here is going to be -3, -3. So it works. If this wasn't around the origin, it wouldn't work. So now, if I play it, it looks super complex, but it really isn't. And also, if you notice, I set that Boolean inside the script to snap it to me. So what if I set that to false? And you can actually do that if you set your... Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. If you set your variable right here to public, then that means Unity is allowed to use it with other scripts. So Unity Editor actually has the functionality to change any variable inside your script. So if you look right here, the prefab script, that's the thing we made. So just like, if you're editing values on the character controller, you can edit stuff here. So right now, you see, snap others to me. So if I set that to be false, so if I just uncheck that box, now you'll look, the player doesn't follow me. He's just stuck there. But then if I set it again, oops, there we go. See, he instantly snaps to be opposite to me, and then he's doing it again. All right? Yeah. So I suggest if you are going to do some scripting in your game, make everything separate and kind of like abstracted from each other. So like have one script that just does the health bar, or have one script that just does the health, or one script that just moves doors, or something like that. And then reference between them, because that's much easier than trying to have one script do everything. That's not a good thing to try to do.
I'm gonna ask some pretty dumb questions.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, where do you put the script inside of Unity?
Okay, so when you make a new script, it'll show up down here. So you can right-click, create C# script right there. I currently have mine inside of standard assets, I think. And then what you can do is you can just drag it onto, the player or any other game object on there. It has to be on a game object somewhere. So I have my prefab script on the player right now, but you can attach it to as many things as you want. It's not limited to just one.
Where do you originally type it in?
Well, when you create C# script, I'll create it here. So like new script. And currently MonoDevelop isn't working on the MacBooks. That's like their code editor. So I'm using Sublime Text. That's my favorite text editor. If you want to get it, I think it's sublimetext.org, but I'll look it up.
Why is MonoDevelop not working? Is something with the administrator code, or is it just not on Mac?
I don't know.
It's because we're not adding them.
Yeah.
How do we get
It's
that fixed?
sublimetext.com. I would suggest this text editor anyway. I think this is better than MonoDevelop anyway. So
It's because we're not adding them.
anyway, so now that I've made that new script, Unity will automatically take it and put all of the default stuff that you have in it. So if I go ahead and open it up, so if I go ahead and open up the script I just made, it's not empty. It has all of those predefined functions in there, like start and update, and it imports all that stuff for you, just so you don't have to type extra things.
Okay.
All right, any more questions?
What's that called again?
Sublime Text. Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. It's my favorite text editor.
So Sublime Text and Unity kind of talk to each other, and when you update it in Sublime Text, it automatically updates it in Unity.
They don't talk to each other, but Unity is smart enough to know, hey, this file has changed since the last time I've imported it. I'm going to import it again, and then update all the stuff in there. Yeah. All right.
How do you guys feel with this?
Don't worry. Programming is a little hard to get started, but once you get started, it's much easier to actually get going. The main thing is the syntax. Once you have the syntax down, you have pretty much everything down, because at that point it's just, thinking about what do I want to do in particular.
So, I mean, I've done some work on it, and I've done some lessons and tutorials. I think that we should probably all start with some kind of tutorial or something. Maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, don't just
I'll be making the files for this actual world available. I'll give it to her. She can put it on the Google Drive or whatever. And I'll put a screencast of this on YouTube or on the Google Drive or somewhere so that you guys can go back and, actually look at the code and pick it apart. And I would suggest, getting the code for the prefab script, just opening it up and changing some values. So, what happens if you change this? What happens if you take away this negative? What happens if you don't define this variable? And then, when you go into Unity, I will tell you, if you do that, it will error out. But an important thing is to look at errors. So look in the console, actually read the error that it's giving you, and see if you can figure out why that doesn't work. Because that's a lot of being a programmer, is figuring out why something doesn't work, because nothing you write the first time will ever work, I guarantee it. Even me, who's been programming for 4 years, you still can't just write code and have it work. It's a lot of coding is just, staring at it and being like, I forgot a semicolon, didn't I? So, yeah. Yeah, so,
Right.
any more questions?
So maybe we can plan something where we are doing a tutorial of some sort of programming for Friday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three in beta or 2?
What?
You want us 3 in beta or?
Yeah, get Sublime Text 3. It's in beta, but it's good enough. Alright.